Rating scales and behavioral statements. In this video, we walk through every behavioral statement in the ACC BARS framework, look at the two rating scales side by side, and address the scoring nuances around NA and binary statements. By the end, you'll know what each statement is, where each one lives, and how to rate it. 19 behavioral statements, 6 competencies, 2 rating scales. This is the core of ACC BARS, the specific behaviors you're listening for when you evaluate coaching at the ACC level. We're going to walk through each one, not to memorize, but to build your observation vocabulary. By the end of this video, these statements will feel familiar, and you'll start hearing coaching differently. Here's the landscape. 19 statements spread across 6 competencies. Each one describes a specific, observable behavior, not a quality, not a trait, not an impression. A behavior you can point to and say, that happened at this moment. Coach invites the client to identify their desired coaching outcome is observable. Coach is a good listener, is not. That distinction is the foundation of everything we're about to cover. Competency 3 has 4 behavioral statements, the most of any competency. It covers how the coaching session gets set up. A3.1, the coach invites the client to identify their desired coaching outcome. When you hear what would make this conversation valuable for you today, that's A3.1 in action. A3.2, coach and client reach an agreement on what to accomplish. A3.3, the coach shows curiosity about the client and how they relate to what they want. And A3.4, the coach attends to the agenda throughout unless the client indicates otherwise. 4 statements, and they all live in the first few minutes of the session. That's why the opening of a coaching session carries so much evaluative weight. Notice the example on screen. What would make this conversation valuable for you today? Clean, open, client-directed. That's A3.1 demonstrated well. But here's where it gets interesting. What if the coach says, so it sounds like this is about your relationship with your manager before the client has finished exploring? That's the coach framing the topic, not the client. A3.2 requires mutual agreement, not the coach's interpretation. The line between guiding and directing is subtle at ACC level. Your job as a mentor coach is to notice which side of that line the coaching falls on. Competency 4 has 3 statements. A4.1, the coach acknowledges client insights and learning in the moment. A4.2, the coach explores the client's expression of feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs, or suggestions. A4.3, the coach expresses support and concern for the client. When a client shares a worry and the coach says, that sounds like it really matters to you, that's A4.2 and A4.3 working together. The coach is both exploring the feeling and expressing support. What you won't hear at ACC level is deep integration of these, the way a PCC candidate might weave them. At ACC, you're looking for, did it happen? Was it genuine? Competency 5 maintains presence, 3 statements. A5.1, the coach is curious throughout the session. A5.2, the coach acknowledges situations that the client presents. A5.3, the coach allows the client to direct the conversation at least some of the time. 5 seconds of silence after the client finishes speaking, followed by a question that builds on what they said. That's A5.1 and A5.3 together. The coach is curious, and they're giving the client space. Presence is the competency that's hardest to fake. Either the coach is tracking the client's process, or they're running their own agenda. You can usually hear the difference within the first few exchanges. Competency 6, listens actively. A6.1, the coach uses summarizing or paraphrasing to confirm understanding. A6.2, the coach makes observations that support the client in creating new associations. A6.3, the coach co-creates a shared vision with the client. When the coach says, "You mentioned feeling stuck earlier, and now you're talking about not having permission," do you see a connection there? That's A6.2. The coach isn't interpreting. They're placing two pieces of the client's language side by side and inviting the client to make the connection. That's a very different skill than paraphrasing, even though both live under active listening. Competency 7 evokes awareness. A7.1, the coach acknowledges the client's new awareness, learning, and movement toward the desired outcome. A7.2, the coach supports the client in viewing the situation from new or different perspectives. A7.3, the coach inquires about or explores the client's ideas, beliefs, thinking, emotions, and behaviors in relation to the desired outcome. When the coach asks, "What might this look like from your team's perspective?" That's A7.2, a single question that shifts the frame. Competency 7 is where compound questions cause the most damage. What's coming up for you when we talk about this? And what would you do about it first? Two questions stacked into one, with the second steering toward action before the client has answered the first. Competency 8 facilitates client growth. A8.1, the coach partners with the client to create or confirm specific action plans. A8.2, the coach asks questions to support the client in translating awareness into action. A8.3, the coach supports the client to close the session. When the coach asks, "What's one thing you could try before we meet next?" That's A8.2, not prescribing, not advising, asking the client to design their own next step. The distinction between partnering and prescribing is one of the most common evaluation points at ACC level. What you should do is not A8.1, it's the coach taking over. Now you've seen all 19 statements. Let's look at how you rate them. Two scales exist side by side. The 7-point scale runs from exemplary down through extremely proficient, sufficient, not quite sufficient, insufficient, to not applicable. The 4-point scale is what the scoring algorithm actually uses. 4 exceeds the standard, 3 meets the standard, 2 below the standard, 1 does not meet the standard, plus not applicable. Proficient on the 7-point corresponds roughly to meets the standard on the 4-point. Both describe the same spectrum. For your work as a mentor coach, the 4-point scale is the one you'll use most. A quick word about not applicable. NA means there was genuinely no opportunity for the behavior to appear. The session ended before the coach could facilitate closure, so A8.3 is NA. That's legitimate. What NA is not is a polite way to say, "I didn't notice it." If the coach had the opportunity to demonstrate a behavior and didn't, that's a 1 does not meet, not NA. The difference matters because NA is excluded from the scoring algorithm entirely. Marking something NA when it should be a 1 inflates the score. It's the one more scoring nuance. Some behavioral statements are essentially binary, even on the 4-point scale. Coach supports the client to close the session. The coach either does this or doesn't. There's no partial demonstration of session closure. In cases like these, you're marking 3 meets or 1 does not meet. A 2 would mean they sort of close the session, which doesn't really make sense. Not every statement works this way, but knowing which ones are binary helps you rate more accurately. These 19 statements are your observation lens, not a scorecard to fill, not a checklist to tick, a vocabulary for naming what you hear in a coaching session. When you listen to a coaching session in Unit 7.4, you'll have these in front of you. You're not trying to catch everyone. You're listening for patterns of demonstration and absence. In the next unit, we add the second layer. What consistent and inconsistent behaviors actually sound like for each competency. That's the texture behind the ratings.